Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 12 of the anime series Death Parade. For all intents and purposes, the series finale, and just wow. Not that there was ever any doubt that this was going to be a beautiful sort of wrapping up in a pretty bow, for the end of this series. It was just an amazing, amazing episode. Everything I could have potentially wanted and more in a finale of this particular series. We're picking up right where we left off in a sense with Oculus approaching and accosting Nona. And he tries to do that little flowery chin thing on her to read her mind. And she, ninjutsu jumps out of the way. And she's like, oh, I'm not giving you a peek. Let's see what happens here. Of course, calling into question whether or not it's for the greater good that she has implanted emotions into an arbiter like Decim. And of course, Decim is really strongly mulling over the entire having to judge Chiyuki at this point. I think it was quite interesting after the previous episode where you had a character like Ginty, who, for me, I really hated him by the end of that episode. And then after having a couple conversations with some folks, some of you folks watching, I really kind of started to perceive it in a different manner because I had liked the Mayu character and I saw what, basically Ginty had done to her as being a sort of, kind of abuse. But the thing is, that's the form and function of this Quindecim environment. And we can't really, do much about that. We're kind of the humans in the equation where we're, just incredulous that, a character like Mayu, her soul was essentially kind of sort of wasted. Even if she did get what she wanted in the end and she was able to join sort of souls, arguably with Harada, the, pop singer idol of hers, it still seemed like she was raked over the coals by Ginty. And the thing is, as I sort of, made the analogy, it's kind of like going to a foreign country and reacting to their different ways with judgment. This is the way the arbiters and that entire system in Quindecim operates. And from the outside, from the human element, looking in at this, it seems absurd. It seems like we should be angry at Ginty, but as we see, there's more to the story when we follow up with Ginty toward the end of the episode. More on that in a few. But basically, we have sort of what Decim is doing to Chiyuki in this episode is very much exactly what Ginty did to Mayu. Gave her the option, basically, let's see if she's going to be selfless or selfish. You can potentially, reclaim your life, be brought back to life, if you exchange your soul with another. You basically at random will choose someone else to take your place. And it's the most selfish and sort of conniving trickery. And I think the divisive blow of Decim's doing this to Chiyuki was that much lessened because we already saw this done through the eyes of Ginty and Mayu in a much more scathing fashion. We didn't necessarily have as much compassion toward Ginty as we do, Decim in this particular scenario. And I think people would have walked away from what Decim was doing to Chiyuki in this episode with the sort of, taken aback framework the same way they had done with Ginty, if they hadn't seen Ginty do this first. Because this entire scenario turns out, plays out to be a ruse. Essentially, they've gone to the bottommost depths where all the dummies of the former souls that have been arbitrated, whether they've gone up or down, now lay in like a stockpile, like a garbage pile. And the entire world has been transformed into the world Chiyuki left behind, giving her sort of a last vision of her mother. Of course, we find out that this was all just fake. It was all just a ruse. And, but the whole idea was to make her connect with that world internally, sort of emotionally, and then have her judge her next action. Would she reclaim her life by sacrificing strangers, or would she be selfless and, choose to move on? And we see this high conflict of just heart-ripping, drama where she very nearly presses the button. She very nearly gives in, and she still she's envisioning all of the souls they've encountered throughout the course of the series that she's helped arbitrate, or she's been a witness to the arbitration of. And they've all affected her. They've all affected her choice, in a sense, to be more selfless, to not want to, strike out at a stranger whose family might miss them and lose them in the same manner her mother lost her when she committed suicide. And you have that point where Decim is grasping his chest once again. And just as he, freaks out, he screams out and he's crying and he falls to his knees, and this whole vision, this sort of ruse shatters. It just ripped out my heart. Seeing Decim finally giving into those emotions that we only saw hinted at in the last couple of episodes, that he was just perceiving within himself. And now to be so distraught by what he had to put Chiyuki through, you can tell that there is somewhat, I think, in any case, a love between them. Whether that's a camaraderie versus a romantic love, is basically left to you to decide, left to you, the viewer. And I kind of personally, with my sort of hopeless romantic aesthetic in life, I kind of lean toward the, it was a mutual respect, but it was also, there was a little bit of romantic love there as well. Because Decim was really just obsessed with her, and for good reason. She was the human quotient. Very much did she live up to, in the course of this series, exactly what I sort of predicted in the earliest going that she would be. She would be the voice of reason, she would be the voice of the emotion, the human quotient, and she would be the one to affect Decim. Little did I know that there were strings behind the works, and it was Nona manipulating the scene and planting those emotions into Decim to see what the reaction would be, and causing conflict between her and Oculus, and this whole environment, that kind of situation. But just absolutely phenomenal. When they finally embrace each other in that, after the dream has shattered and they're holding each other, and you see Oculus is, sort of watching this, and Nona's watching this, and that kind of situation. I can't even pinpoint the emotions that were going through me. It was like somewhat relief, somewhat sadness, because I knew this was the end, somewhat shock at the fact that Decim had finally broken down, being just saddened to see that, and as well as, as an anime viewer, the part of me that wasn't wrapped up in it all is still so astounded by the art, the artistry of the story, and the beauty of the scene, and it just enraptured me. And so when you have them kind of, making amends, that is to say, Decim and Chiyuki, and they're kind of just laughingly talking about, well, what's next? Where are we going? What's up? And did he make his decision where she's going? And, not in this sort of dummy, garbage pit or whatever. She's like, oh, good, thanks. She's then happily trying to get him to smile, welcome further souls and newer souls to this environment with a smile, with a friendly face, be more human, essentially, is that call she leaves him with. And sort of, it's like happy tears, but it's also sad tears as she's getting in that elevator and she knows this is goodbye, whether, her fate is a positive one or not. This is goodbye from this, particular realm that she spent so much time in through the course of the series. And Decim himself, very much as she's sort of equating the value of everything they've experienced together, Decim himself does. And after a very stiff, fake sort of smile that he tries to give her, envisioning all the time he spent with her, he finally is able to make a real smile. And this brings her to tears again. It brings me to tears. I was definitely, misty-eyed as hell. And so Chiyuki, we say farewell to you, reincarnated. And the question, as the series ends, it's absolutely fascinating, because we are definitely set up with the idea that this is going to continue. You know, this isn't like we're just cut off and we can't imagine that there are further things happening. And it leaves open the potential for a sequel at some point down the line that if they ever make, I hope, whether they follow it up with a movie, an OVA, or another anime season, I can only hope that this particular, you know, incarnation of the show, or I should say the next incarnation, will follow suit in being this dramatic and just, you know, hooking you in and captivating and beautifully written and beautifully played out, because it was a masterpiece, this particular series. And I love, as I say, those scenes toward the end, because you have, calling back to Ginty, when he finally made his decision, you know, the Mayu decision, if you will, in the previous episode, we saw his cat, Mimine, had disappeared. It's like the cat had woken up and realized something and took off. And we basically see Clavis in this episode basically making his home of Ginty's little section of Quindecim, or whatever it's called. And Ginty's kind of like, what the hell are you doing here? You know, but I think it was really interesting that he is, you know, revealing to Clavis that the cat just disappeared, hasn't come back since that event, although it doesn't seem to, you know, mark any sort of impression on Ginty that they coincided. But I love that Ginty is fashioning one of his little doll things on the bar, and it's the personification of Mayu, which calls back to the conversation I had with one of you guys, which opened my eyes as far as not being so scathing and judgmental toward Ginty for what he did to Mayu, because the form and function of that, he tried to give her every chance he could. And her life played an impression on him very much in the same means as Chiyuki's life did on Decim. So they are very much cut from the same cloth, even though they are completely different. And they do things somewhat differently. And we weren't meant to feel compassion toward Ginty. This leveled that playing field by the end for me to go ahead and feel, you know, compassion toward Ginty, because he was moved by Mayu enough to make a personification of her, to remember her, the challenge she represented, and the effect she had on him. It's just a beautiful soliloquy to that, to not only the entire, you know, series, as far as how the characters have interacted, and especially that whole thing between Decim and Chiyuki, but to see that the ramifications of that whole aesthetic have now affected Ginty in his own little private world, his section of this world. It just warms the heart to me and makes it that much more compelling and intriguing and beautiful. And so by the end, of course, you have both Nona and Oculus reciting the rules of the arbitrators, you know, essentially. But there seems to be a fourth rule that I don't remember being there before, and that is, you know, if the arbitrators walk hand in hand with humanity, it's going to be their downfall. It's Oculus's opinion that even he himself, even Nona, everyone that exists in this environment is no better than a dummy. And they need to be that way, because if human emotions enter the equation, how can they ever formulate a judgment against the living? In a sense, they have to be separate from the living in order to really objectively view them. And it's Nona's case that, no, we need to change things, and we need to do things with more heart, with more emotion, with more level playing field with the humans coming into this environment. Understand them, equate their emotions with our own. And it's just absolutely fascinating, that final scene of the two new souls entering Quindecim. Their Decim is behind the bar. He welcomes them. He smiles at them. And just as the kick-ass OP music begins, the camera flips around, and there is the dummy commemoration of Chiyuki for all the impressions and all the emotions and all the beauty she, you know, enraptured Decim with. I rewound that entire scene, both the scene toward the end as well as the one where, you know, he finally breaks down, and I watched them again before recording this, because it was just so much raw emotion and so much satisfaction. As I said at the early stage of this particular video, this finale gave me everything I could have wanted. It gave me a resolution to Chiyuki's journey. It gave me a resolution to the journey Decim has been on, and the question that Nona and Oculus have been debating, even though Oculus didn't know what was going on for most of the time, but it was an open debate anyway, because that's sort of going against his mandate of, you know, these people, these arbitrators need to be dummies, and Nona was challenging that. You know, Chavot turned out to just be a story. You can make your sort of theories on how exactly it played out with the dynamics of the characters. I offered up two possibilities, one that it was sort of meant to allegory the relationship between Decim and Chiyuki, as well as potentially the relationship between Nona and Decim. And there's still enough sort of value to that it could be either or by the time you're done, but you basically have the impression that, well, this really was just a storybook. It was a very strong and poignant memory for Chiyuki of her childhood, of her life before this, and it was something that really captivated, seemingly, Nona, in the sense that she knew this person was going to affect Decim, coinciding with what manipulation of emotions she put into him. And so it's like everything came full circle. Everything finished with an absolute amount of closure, and yet there's still the promise of a potential story yet to come, whether it's one we imagine for ourselves, whether it's a sequel series at some point down the line. The series as a whole is just an artistic masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. Every step of the way, every twist and turn in the story, there was never anything that was so cliche that would have left you like, oh, we've seen this before, you know, and done better elsewhere or done worse elsewhere. Every step of the way of this series was unique and refreshing and beautiful and artistic and elegant. And it was an amazing ride. It was an amazing ride. It truly deeply affected me watching this series multiple times, and I don't think I will soon forget it. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this particular finale and the series as a whole. Just a masterpiece that I feel absolutely fortunate to have been alive to watch. You know, not in Quindecim myself and having to be arbitrated and missing out on the opportunity to experience this particular kind of an anime. Absolutely a true classic in the modern sense. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of the series as a whole, as well as the finale. Did it wrap up and give you a sense of closure? Were you saddened by it? Were you sort of, you know, was it a bittersweet thing for you, kind of like it was for me, because now it's over and I'm really deeply depressed about that. But I'm also so satisfied by the closure that I'll be able to start the new day and not regret having watched the series. So let me know, you know, anything goes in the comments below what you thought of this series, if you followed through, and if not, you know, what's wrong with you? Go back and watch it right now. And then let me know what you thought of it. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.